Okay, everyone. So welcome anyway, and let's get underway. So this one I'm looking forward to today. It's continuing on the dark night of the soul and what we've been sharing in the whole hero's journey to 17 stages. So we're getting close to the end now, which is good. So what we're at now is the Master of Two Worlds. So let's just start. Who would like to say the Lord's Prayer to get underway today? Okay, who wants to speak the Lord's Prayer?
Yeah, I can do it one.
Yeah, I will one. No, you go, Steve.
Do it, Steve.
What did you say, Christine? What was that you said, Christine? Okay.
Do you know your two favourite words, Steve?
What's that?
You know.
Oh. Okay, let's start. Okay, O thou from who the breath of life comes, who fills all realms of sound, light, and vibration, may your light be experienced in my utmost holiest. Your heavenly domain approaches. Let your will come true in the universe, all that vibrates, just as on earth, that is material and dense. Give us wisdom, understanding, assistance for our daily need. Detach the fetters of faults that bind us, our karma, like we let go the guilt of others. Let us not be lost in superficial things, materialism, common temptations, but let us be freed from what keeps us off from our true purpose. From you comes the all-working will, the lively strength to act, the song that beautifies, all that renews itself from age to age, sealed in trust, faith, and truth. I confirm with my entire being. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay, so today's word is going to be very interesting. Some of you have already watched this video, but there was this extraordinary video which I found, who's seen the Moksha video? I know Grace has seen it, Christine's seen it. Is there anyone else who's watched the Moksha video? But if not, I'm going to give basically everyone a link today, but I'm going to go through it as a word to start.
Can you give a quick recap, Warren, what it's about?
I will be, yes, but have you seen it?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, so I'm not sure.
It's one that if you would have only watched it in the last day or two.
Okay, probably not then. Yeah.
So if you haven't watched it in the last day or two, you wouldn't have seen it. It's a 40-minute video by Brett Stewart of the Remote Viewing Research Project.
Oh, yeah, I've seen the first 15 minutes. That was the link from yesterday.
Okay.
That's the one, Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, I just got to the part they were talking about the parallel universe things, yeah.
Right. I'm going to go through a bit of a summary of it, and then I'll give people the video. I'm going to put it in the link now to watch after the webinar, but not for now. But this is a extraordinary video. It's 43 minutes it goes for. So I've been taking notes of the video. So what it was is, those of you who don't know what remote viewing is, remote viewing, it's basically where you read unconscious data in the future. And the US government basically in the 70s was doing a lot of remote viewing through military remote viewers. And to try and simplify how it works, it's basically a way of psychic spying or psychically getting information on things. What the US government discovered from what Russia had done and others is that you could actually tap into the unconscious realm like science and gain data from basically past, present, and future. So remote viewing, a frequently done project might be, let's say that the US government decided that they wanted to find out where Saddam Hussein is hiding his nuclear missiles. So they go, okay, how are we going to find this out? So they might get 10 remote viewers. They won't tell them what the project is. They'll get them in a room somewhere away privately, and we get these guys to tune in, breathe down and move into a deep state, like a brain state, like a theta state. And what the theta state means is that a much sort of quieter, very still state of mind where you're half asleep, half awake, or, you know, very, very kind of deep state. And they would get them to write down their sensory impressions on everything ranging from, what are you feeling? You know, like feeling like lost, vulnerable, frightened, excited, joyful. What's the textures of the site where you're at? And they might get, say, hard, you know, strong, rusty, firm, dusty. What's the temperature? Hot, heated, burning, strong. What's the, say, dimensions? Oh, broad, wide, large, spacious. And then they might, and then if all the remote viewers are getting the same kind of thing, they might start to think, okay, we think there might be a nuclear weapons site. So the target they might have done is, you know, what's basically going on, because they may have found, say, on their US military intelligence map, some kind of weird looking site in the middle of the desert, say somewhere in Baghdad, which they can't quite work out what it is because it's well hidden. And then if all the remote viewers got the same thing, they'd go, right, okay, we think this is probably a nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction site. And they would be pretty accurate, quite extraordinary. J.J. Hertak, who wrote The Keys of Enoch, actually wrote a book called Remote Viewing, where the future science, and I actually bought the book, and it's amazing. It talks about how he and Russell Targ and guys like that, who'd all linked up with the guys who'd founded the remote viewing project. So Hertak's a big fan of it. It's a growing science of being able to tell the future. Many of you might know that I've used it with financial things. I use it to this day in cryptocurrency trading and remote viewing and things like that. Vina, who I do my investing with cryptos, also uses it heavily. It's a very powerful tool for financial markets and viewing things. What happened? So the reason I'm giving some background on what remote viewing is to understand the Moksha project and the power of what I'm about to share with you for the word before we start with the hero's journey today. So what they did was they got together 4 remote viewers who, by the way, weren't what you call religious people. You know, they're not people who were big into kind of, you know, the Bible, into Hinduism, into any kind of spiritual teaching. And what they did was say, let's see if we can find out what really goes on with moksha. Now, if you don't know what moksha means, moksha basically is the wheel of incarnation, karma, life and death, rebirth, reincarnation. And it's like the cycle of reincarnation where you keep coming onto the earth, living, dying, and then circling all the way back around again, like a vortex. So they've wanted to find out, what is moksha, why is it happening, and what is really going on with this whole thing? Like, why are we reincarnating? And, you know, what is actually, you know, really going on, so to speak. So what happened was, when they actually started the project, so I just took a study, I've been writing notes of it. So they asked a series of questions, and now keep in mind, all these remote viewers were people who had no idea what they were remote viewing. So none of them knew they were remote viewing this project. None of them knew. So the guy, Brett Stewart, who was actually discussing the findings of he and the other remote viewers, he was not in any way religious before doing this, or spirit or spiritual, other than his remote viewing kind of work and tapping into the unconscious. So he was just given a project and he just wrote down what he found, as did all the others. Keep in mind that every single one of them got virtually exactly the same findings. Now, so they went through a series of questions, and for me, it was extraordinary listening to it, especially after some of the things that happened to me the last 3.5 years and what I've been shown, and even things that happened with me with Albany, with Grace and Christine in meditation, because let's just say everything that he said is exactly what I've seen, and everything that's also talked about in the Keys of Enoch and Pistis Sophia. So it's kind of another confirmation, but from a scientific point of view, which can certainly add great power to getting the message out to people what's going on. So what is surrounding the earth, what all the remote viewers found, they all saw this like frequency fence or grid, like a checkpoint or rest point where souls are drained. So basically earth is fenced in like an animal pellet pen, and they all were writing down words to do with perverted injustice. So what they were seeing was like a large naturally formed object, like a planet, that acts as an animal pen to make us like a refugee camp tucked away out of sight, a magnetic force which stirs, agitates over an expanse of time. They all got like a planetary system extremely crowded and jammed, ghostly voices flooding in, incredibly harrowing, bone-chilling experience. All of them were feeling it when doing the remote viewing. Now, what's interesting is that's exactly what I saw when I was in Albany. And when I went through my periods of in 2018, when I was taken into higher realms, I was shown various things like this. And a lot of mind control implants, frequencies, and energy stuff was taken off me. And I remember that before I could actually access these higher things, I had to be taken past the frequency fence. And we destroyed the frequency fence in relation to us and freed ourselves up. And from that point on, I've been able to do it as well as the mind control implants. But by and large, these things limit the consciousness. So it's over Earth. How does it work? This is what the remote viewers also found. Earth is shielded by a companion object. They weren't sure it was a physical thing, a type of advanced technology. One remote viewer even wrote the words hocus pocus. Creates the net, squeezes around the globe. Magnetic vice attached through a large place, which goes ahead and, and basically individual has bombardment as they pass through this system. So in other words, as individuals pass into this galaxy or into this system and getting life and birth, they feel lost as they go through, lose their memory, but desire remains consistent. So basically all their memories get lost and they come in disoriented. That's why babies come in usually in shock, bawling, crying their eyes out, because they get the bombardment as they pass through this system and feel completely lost as they're going through. So what they were seeing was like a gravitational lensing where souls are bent back towards this planet. So if your soul is light, instead of shooting off after you die or pass on into the next dimensions or moving on to heaven or different planets, there was like an artificial frequency structure which lenses or curves your life back to Earth again, which basically forces you to come back into these realms and have to reincarnate and stay here. So it's powering the rotating object appearing like an axle in space created by this lensing effect. So it's like a fracturing of the soul takes place. So what is happening to the soul? So this was the next question that was asked that the remote viewers have been given. What is being done to the reincarnated souls? Mind and body frayed and fractured, confused and upset about the predicament, something being taken from them without being conscious of the process. So it's like a harvest of honey from bees, like going in there and basically how you take bees and take honey from them. So like taking extraction from humans. So basically like the Matrix, a big harvesting plantation where humans are being purely used as energy sources to extract from them. So that's basically what they found was happening. So a third party which extracts from the box, takes for another purpose, puts the bees in the box. Toxic was the word that they had. So a third party taking the humans and taking energies from them. So when souls reincarnate, they're effectively losing their energies. So the number of souls or individuals reincarnated creates instability for the process, crowded souls, confusion, anger by confinement. So they found that basically having a crowded planet full of anger, full of confusion, full of anger, full of grief, full of war and all that feeds the energy of what's going on and is necessary to give energy to the process. So the intelligence or mind of the soul is being fed on by a parasitic force. It's very unpleasant, very evil, sadistic, and wholly twisted was the words that the remote viewers were coming out with. How did this begin? Why is it even allowed? So what they found in their remote view was historically the planet was viewed with envy by an external force. There was a time when there was no reincarnation. When beings died, they weren't trapped here. And that's actually what I learned with Toby and Yvonne, and what I saw myself was there was a time when Earth was actually 12th dimensional or Terra a long, long time ago, and where there was no reincarnation happening at all. But due to a huge war and due to a big fall and a big slaughter, which of course Grace and I have seen and was shown through scripture, and I think I've taught before, a huge war took place, massive explosions, huge force met with existence. Fate of the planet was decided due to conquest by an external third party. This, by the way, was the exact stuff I was shown when I was taken with the councils about this treaty or agreement that was made. So what happened was that an agreement was made, and this is also talked about in Mr. Sophia Gospel, between the Archons or these dark forces that were fighting for control of the planet, and between the forces or higher councils. And in the end, they reached a treaty on it, and they were given Earth. That was what this showed up, which is what I was told as well in the war that happened, where at one stage there was a loss, and the war was so serious. I actually saw the whole war in 2018 over a period of days, and I was in shock. And I remember ringing Grace and telling her about what I was seeing, but I saw this war that took place, and I saw how close the galaxies were to being completely taken over by dark forces, and they were actually forced to shut down and create a quarantine. I actually saw them doing it, like creating this quarantine or lockdown to keep everything locked away. So that's what I was shown. So that seems to line up with what these people were seeing, which was that Earth was taken by, there was this kind of conquest, and they reached a treaty. They locked or quarantined Earth in and gave this realm over to these Archons as part of the deal or settlement, subject to certain conditions. So they gave up Earth and gave up the realms that we're living in right now. And so part of the agreement was giving up Earth and protecting it in exchange for keeping other things intact for a higher purpose. So that's actually what I saw, that the Earth was locked down, quarantined, and blocked off from the higher realms to stop contamination for a time, which also explains why Christ came. That's a different discussion. This is just about this project. The next thing was, how do we achieve moksha? That was a question that was asked. So what they found was two things. They got a lot more information just that. Upon death, the particles like cosmic dark matter is launched from the individual like a cannonball, and emission curves from the center of our being or central nervous system. If you do an exact moment of death recreation, what they were finding was in all sessions and almost every remote viewer who's ever done this, and I've done one myself, I've actually done an exact remote view of death recreation of what happens after death, and I saw it very clearly. Like it does. What they're saying here is pretty much what I saw too. And I also saw that there is like this thing that they see as well, like a highway or whatever else, or a portal, which you can actually go to, but you've got to be conscious and you've got to be, I've cleared out your karma and blocks or whatever else. So you see a spiral at the top of the head of the individual from the system, a massive amount of energy or kinetic energy is released, and the intelligence of the mind goes to a place of tangled mess or superhighway for the soul. But a mechanical object that's set up, which is mentioned earlier on, so when you go back up here, it talks about this mechanical companion object. What they find is that prevents people from reaching the portal, which otherwise will stop you, where you can go anywhere you want and leave this earth and leave this realm and go to your next stage of evolution. So to achieve moksha, the remote viewers all found the positional angle by which you leave the body is important. So the Egyptians laid a certain angle from out-of-body experience, and in fact, the Tibetan Book of the Dead talks a lot about the rituals and the processes that one must go to before they die to make sure they achieve liberation. So they also said the same thing in their own way. Otherwise, if you fail to guide at the correct angle and go correctly to the beings who are basically working for the good of humanity, the soul will simply reflect back into another body. So in other words, reincarnate. What the other thing they saw was a blissful moment, an unseen actor provides a safety rope. So in other words, there is a group, this is like angels, the councils, who are really desiring to help people achieve liberation and get out of this whole thing. And if you exit at the right angle and if you've got the right codes, what's interesting is the Pistis Sophia talks about the codes that Enoch spoke about to Hertak, which you've got to use. There's codes, there's words, there's activations. The Tibetan Book of the Dead and many of the Hebrews used to read the Psalms over embalmed bodies as they were being embalmed, and they used to read them in a certain angle and ritual to help that soul achieve liberation. So if you actually, it talks about this in Pistis Sophia, in the third repentance, how they would actually go through and they would read the Bardo Fail, which was a Tibetan Book of the Dead. So there was a group waiting to help you the rest of the way out if you exit at the right angle. What they found was the energetics of leaving the body, there's a great deal of fear, and because of the reincarnation process, you have no memory of what's going on or happened. People therefore get trapped in this device because of the fear. When you die, you don't go into the light. The end of this procedure is like you've had a vice on your head for a long period of time into your brain or mind, and there are causal cables going into your mind, and if you start to sound like the Matrix, it certainly is, isn't it? So freedom from moksha means this device is ripped off from the top of your head. When I read that, when I heard that, I was just like, fuck, you know, because when I went through my encounters, and especially even last year when I was taken through some realms, there was things being taken off my head and implants being taken off, and I felt things being taken off me. So and since that's all happened, I pretty much can see things very clearly and see energy and hear very clearly. So freedom from moksha means that this device is removed from your head, and now you're guaranteed liberation from this. So it's like a violent process to free your mind, very similar to the Matrix when Neo woke up. It's violent because this device that you're wearing over you literally keeps you in a state of slumber or state of sleep or state of delusion, where the archons can influence, lead, guide, and pretty much do whatever the fuck they want to do with you. So very, very interesting, so to speak. So the key is the angle you exit your body. Finding the right posture. Fear of the entire situation as a condemning factor means souls go into a place which leads them back to the earth. So why was it created? And if you read the scriptures in Isaiah, it talks about this place where these lower astral realms and these worms do not die and fire do not quenched. So it's one tiny component in a larger system. So what they found is we are very much in part of a funnel, a state of sloth or state of moral degradation or spiritual collapse. The system encircles us. Proponents have cast a wide net. The advocates of his system they described as like demons or evil beings, the remote viewers, keeping in mind these guys weren't like, you know, spiritual or whatever else, or not traditional Christian or anything else. Parasitic, twisted, warped, even evil. They put man or mind in a cave, wars, anarchy, destruction, cyclical revolutions. So in other words, which would also explain human sacrifice. And what I know William and I have often shared with people, these things fuel the system. So when they do human sacrifice, drink the blood of children, do wars, do anarchy, do the kind of stuff that's going on now, it fuels the system and gives it power. It keeps in duality. So it's like an alchemical process from uncertainty, mayhem, and it comes from having far too many people on this planet. Which is so interesting, because I actually said this about 2 months ago. I said, the problem is that we've got too many people on this planet and too many people everywhere, which literally is just impossible to manage. Like, it's impossible to have this many people on this planet and make it workable, because, you know, you got so many different people with so many different like priorities. This is intended as it creates the chaos which feeds into the system and empowers it. For the human appears a part of them, chipped off, carried off somewhere else, like honey taken from bees. They all reported you hear sounds, you hear voices, you hear things like that. You hear drowning out sound, incoherent talk, like a limbo state. These aspects chipped off are like ghost shells, what they used to be, like fragmented souls, which is, of course, what we've also talked about. Aspects of the souls drained up and used, overwhelming melancholy and sadness. Yes, melancholy and sadness associated with remnants. Souls become enslaved, bundled up as a collection as twigs, used as a kindling. Massive injustice. So there you go. That's the hell that we've kind of talked about, that Hades, that realm where souls, as it talks about in Isaiah and Revelation, where their worm does not die and their fire is not quenched, or Gehenna. If you read in the Gospels, they talk about Gehenna, like the place of burning or fire. Now, what's very interesting, if you actually go into that one as well, is you'll see in Isaiah quite a number of references to this burning place of twigs. So in Isaiah 66, it says, they shall look upon the carcasses of men that have transgressed against me. Their worms shall not die, nor their fire shall be quenched. So there talks about fire here. You see it also in Isaiah 34, where it talks about this fire, this place of fire. When I was taken into the realms, the higher realms and lower realms, it's 11:11 as I'm saying this, so like, wow, I actually saw these lower realms, and I saw fires burning in the distance in a realm, and I just didn't want to go near it, so I stayed well away from it. But I was in the realms, and it was very dark, very desolate, very empty, and there were souls even like merged into rocks that had become completely almost formless. That's what I saw when I was there. So it sees how you go on here. And you can see when you read this whole thing here as well, it talks about the land shall become burning pitch. It shall be quenched night or day. Smoke shall go up forever and ever. That's written here. You also can see it in Revelation 20 as well. And it goes in here. And as you go through that one, it said, whoever was not found in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. In other words, obviously, into it, they were given over to these beings as part of their treaty agreement for kindling, for basically whatever they want to do with them, because they were given a chance to basically over and over again through many lifetimes. In the Keys of Enoch, Hertak talks about this, and he actually talks about the this from the 6 seals in Revelation, where when you read this one, it talks about Hades. And one of the things it talks about here, it says that there was a pale horse and death and hell followed after him, or Hades was actually the word used in the original thing, which was a well taught in the Greeks and the Jews and everyone well known in the ancient times as the underworld or lower dimension, or where basically people went to who had continually lived self-serving lives on earth, a realm of Hades, a realm where there would be burning, a realm where there would be kind of emptiness, and a place of kind of like harvesting. And Hertak explains in the Keys of Enoch that what Enoch explained to him was that this is where souls who lifetime after lifetime have had opportunities to address self-serving and address things and find a higher purpose and live their lives to serve humanity and serve the world, who have refused to listen, and not only that, have chosen to cause great harm and, you know, and stop others from also ascending, or stop others from basically, you know, healing up and freeing. So he said these souls basically, he said, would basically be in Hades for many eons, which is what's also taught in Buddhism and Hinduism. So you can see this here. So there's numerous references to this place of kindling, or this place of fire, which Christ also talks about when he gave the parable of Lazarus. And he talks about how Lazarus, who'd been poor in his life, and a rich man who'd refused to even give him any food when he was begging, how the rich man was burning in Hades and being used for kindling. And it all comes down to this treaty, because in the treaty, this is what they were finding, was that there was basically an agreement made that, you know, they'd have this realm of earth, and those who chose to live by the laws of this earth would be given over to these archons or beings, who by and large were a self-serving group. So it says, bundle up as a collection of twigs, and the words of viewers do as massive injustice. So the purpose it was created was every time someone reincarnates, part is chipped off and used a fuel or kindling for a different system, nothing to do with what's going on here. So it's a completely different system entirely. So that's what they found. We're part of an engine feeding into a power plant. Think of it like a railway system or conquest. Our expansion requires energy, oil, or grease to pan the railway. It's not just traveling or conquest, but what is creating a space for those in charge of the operation to pop in and out whenever they want. So that's what they were finding. The final thing was who is responsible. And what all the remote viewers saw was a council of organic entities. That's the words they use, but of course, we would use archons or demons, which is what the Pistis Sophia gospel talks about. They exist and operate from a location incredibly concentrated. Matter exists, a state which freezes time. I don't know if anyone here has seen the movie Doctor Strange, but Doctor Strange, there's a place where they're taken into the dark dimensions, where time is frozen and people get trapped in a time warp where everything keeps coming back and back and back and back. So they exist and operate from an incredibly concentrated location, a state which freezes time and slows down. In the secret history of the world, they talk about the god Saturn or Satan, and how Satan actually freezes time. And what all the Gnostics and the others taught was this dark lord Saturn froze time and basically brought in judgment and strict discipline over the earth and slowed everything down to dense matter. And that was why before, in Genesis 1, the earth was without form and void. And the secret history of the world talks about it as a time when literally time almost stopped dead and everything was frozen for eons. So it's like a bubble, a void zone, or black hole they exist in, creating an artificial timeless environment to exist in and spread their influence out in a timely reality to the universe. Throughout the universe, various gateways, they can pop in whenever they are, And what they also said was the councils have set themselves up as gods. They view themselves as such compared to other life forms, the gods of reality, some right to perpetuate the authority through the universe. Their nature isn't positive, in fact, it's evil. All about their own conquest, taking the energy of the universe, absorbing it, using it for their own purpose, not serving a greater good, harmony, or peace. All to do with conquest, war, and bringing spoils back to create a larger system and act as mortal gods. Okay, so that's what I thought today's word, which is pretty interesting and heavy, and not even from an ancient scriptural text. So before we go on anyway, any comments from anyone? Anyone blown away? Anyone want to take the mic and comment? Just, yeah, it'd be good to hear what people are thinking after that.
Oh, Warren, for me, it just totally resonated because on Friday, in meditation, I actually had seen all these twisted faces, and I did some really deep work on that, and it sort of, I realised what was going on sort of for me, and then when I read that, I saw that yesterday, it just brought everything together, really.
Yeah.
With all the other things done, you know, because actually it was like in the meditation, it was like this screen in front of my face, and these faces, they started off blurry, but as it moved, like it was slide by slide, each face, they became more and more twisted.
Yeah, wow.
And the Grace was able to help me get into a place where I could actually identify what it meant for me, and then like yesterday we mentioned it again, and while she was talking about it, I dropped off the internet that we were connected with, and it was like I was being prevented from even seeing it because I had to watch the video at the beginning. I had to go back and back and back because I kept going to sleep, and I knew what was going on. I just had to keep watching and watching until I could break out of that. I finished up, well, I was quite wide awake in the finish, but it's like, you're not supposed to see this, but it all made sense.
It sure does, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's pretty sobering.
Very. So thanks for going through it again, because I haven't taken any notes of it yet, but it was good to go through it again. Yeah.
Oh, my
reflect
pleasure.
on it.
Yeah, everyone says they're very blown away. Miko says, I listened to many people's near-death experiences that sound like this, where they went to the hell realm and heaven realm. Yeah, I actually had a friend who Grace remembers, basically Pastor Don Rogers, who, when he was 34 and was living a very normal life, was stung when he was out diving, and he actually died. And as he was dying, he was racing through, and he actually went into this dark tunnel, and he actually could see this realm of this gates with fire. And he just says, I don't want to go there. I'm not ready to go there yet. Please give me another chance. And he actually said, as he said those words, his whole body screeched to a halt, turned around and just started shooting straight back. And as he was coming back, he heard his doctor saying, oh my gosh, he's coming back. Yes, he's coming alive again. Oh, and that's what happened. He actually died and they brought him back to life. And that was what got him on his own path. And Grace may remember her friend Yvonne had a friend called Ian, I think it was Ian McKellar or Ian McCallum, but similar story. He died and he actually went into these realms and he saw both heaven and Hades as well. So he saw both realms himself. And and many people, what they describe is incredibly similar. But yeah, so it really was for me a very joyful thing to hear this, because it actually was like, I've been living my whole life on the assumption that was the case, and have been working myself out and even studying every mystery school teaching on how to actually escape moksha. That's been pretty much my life journey. And I actually learning how to do that. And then once I'd learned that, to help others, which is now my path now. I kind of know that I've done that, and provided I stay on my path, but now my path is to actually keep on the path of cleansing every trace or skerrick of karma, and doing the same for as many as possible, to make sure that as many as possible escape this this matrix that we're in, so to speak. So yeah, so that's kind of leads beautifully into today's word, which is on the dark night of the soul, which is what's probably one of the most exciting parts of it, which is stage 16, which is the so the dark night of the soul comes before revelation. So the hero's journey, we got the 17 stages. So let's just quickly walk through these again. So, and what's interesting too is when you read the scriptures, you will find the same thing here. And even with Jacob, for example, who was a very clear case of someone who is a big part of today's message, and the one who became Israel and had the father of the 12 tribes, and he mastered 2 worlds, so to speak. He became the true master of 2 worlds. So a refusal of the call, which generally starts where you don't really want to do it, aid comes to help you. And then from there, you cross the threshold. And Jacob, you find that happened to him when he was called out, was given his birthright. He basically left to go and fled away from his family to get away from Esau, his brother who wanted to kill him. And he ended up in the belly, so to speak, in the belly of a whale, where he ended up basically working for his uncle and getting not particularly well treated. So he went through his trials. He then got married to a beautiful wife. He then got tricked into having another wife who basically threw his uncle in a trick. He then went through his various things, his atonement, his apotheosis, and then came the time when he was sent to go back. He needed to get, literally went through a magic flight, which you will read, because he was pursued by his uncle to try and get back his wealth, and he got supernatural rescue from angels to get out. And then he crossed the return threshold, which is basically what we spoke about last week, which was the basically return to the world. So just as a recap, what this is talking about is you go on the hero's journey, and to make it really simple, something like this happens. You go on a path, and let's just start off by using one example. Like, let's say a simple example before we do a spiritual one from a practical sense. Like, let's say, for example, you are an employee or self-employed, and you realize one day that this is actually going to lead you to being dependent on a system and financial challenges and struggles and vulnerabilities. So you go on your own hero's journey, and you get out there and you go on the path of seeking to become a business owner and investor and become financially independent, and you go through your various trials, various defeats, may even fail quite a number of times as a trader. And then you start the journey back. You get some help, a mentors turn up, you get tempted, you get caught up in get rich schemes or whatever. But then you can't hit a point when you cross the threshold. And the threshold, say, for a business owner might be you started wanting financial freedom for yourself so you could maybe live a good life and, you know, have and do all the things you want to do. But then what happens is those who I've met, and I found the same in my own life, who once you cross that threshold and you start to realize that you do have financial independence, or you're basically you've got business working, you start to realize that, you know, I thought this would make me completely happy and give me everything I wanted, but if anything, I feel more empty than ever. And that's when many businessmen decide, actually, what can be my purpose? You know, how can I serve the world? And like my young son, for example, James, is being mentored by this incredible crypto trader who I think he's got about 25 million in his account. And he just makes ridiculous money. And my son has been doing very, very well, basically doing it, just simply following this guy, being mentored by this guy. And of course, my son was like, you know, because he said to me, this guy knows what he's doing. I said, oh yeah, I watch his stuff and how he does it. He's phenomenal. So my son said, so why would he be doing this small group to help this small group of people? And I said, because when you've got 25 million, and in his case, like he can make him pretty much a million, every week or two without really much problem, it gets pretty boring after a while. So I said, you want to find a way to really give back and serve. So that's what this guy's doing. He wants to give back and serve, because eventually life isn't fun if you're not giving back and serving. And that's basically what ends up happening to many business owners. They make that almost crossing the threshold back over, and we come to this place where they almost reconcile. And often, even for the business owner, they start off by they want to be financially free, which means do nothing and enjoy life. And they end up actually working harder once they cross the threshold back, because they realize they've got a purpose now. And whereas as an employee, they may have worked 30, 40, 50 hours a week, often I find many business owners are working longer hours once they cross the threshold, because now they've got a purpose. They've got a mission. They just, they don't really want to do anything other than do their mission. So it's kind of like a reconciliation, the crossing the threshold. It's like bringing it all together. It's like realizing that the hero's journey may have started for a certain thing, but eventually the very thing that you left, you end up almost coming back to, but with a whole new perspective. So you left the working world because you hated it, for example, and you hated the idea of a job, you hated the idea of being tied down, but then you go back and you actually work harder than ever, because now you've got a new perspective. Now it's a mission, now it's a service, now it's a business that you're doing to help others and make a difference. And or the spiritual journey, it may be the same thing. You may start like I did on my own journey, and I'm sure like Steve Plummer or some others, where originally the spiritual journey is very much about healing. It's clearing your karma. It's about sorting your life out. You break away from your family. You get your challenges from your family. The last thing you want around you is your family, people around you. You almost want to get away from the world, retire into the mountains. And then when you come back, you start to think like Jesus, like Buddha, who on the thresh of enlightenment, when he had actually reached the gates of samadhi and knew he could cross over and not come back, he took one last look back and felt the deepest compassion for humanity and chose to come back and serve. And he chose to be here. So the very world he sought to escape, because he didn't like the negativity, the emptiness, the deadness of the world, he decided to come back. Christ, in a way, was the same. He chose to come back to the world, to come here to serve humanity on a deep, deep level, to help humanity heal and help humanity and serve as many as he could to help them escape moksha, so to speak. So originally, Steve says life of a hermit is appealing at times. Yeah, I agree. I probably feel like that most days, Steve. And yet you come back and help, because every time you see people shift and feel the change, this joy hits your heart and you think, you know what, this is awesome. It's worth it. And you can feel that you're making such a difference, and you can see you're making a difference, and you can see the changes in people's lives that are coming about from the work and the service that you're actually giving to people, so you can see it and you can feel it. So the crossing the threshold is where you come back. And we went through various things to discuss that. So we looked at Lord of the Rings and that last battle, Luke Skywalker. This was a big one, which I mentioned. It's probably one of the best books you could ever read on the hero's journey. It's a wonderful story. It's a whole fiction story. It's a beautiful book. And I'd really recommend that people get this book and read it sometime. It's Hannah Hurnard is probably a classic hero's journey, where she literally leaves and gets away from her appalling relatives. She's a little bit of a loser. I could really relate to this girl, because that's how I felt growing up. I felt ugly. I felt ashamed. I felt skinny. There were so many things I didn't like about myself. And so the original hero's journey was, for Much Afraid, was very selfish in a way. It was, I want to get away from his horrible family, and I want to just be with the shepherd and be with him forever. And in a way, it just follows Song of Solomon, which we'll be covering a bit today as well. And that was certainly my case. I had a hunger for Christ and for God and a love for God, like this book with Hannah Hurnard. But even though I had this great love for God, I was this kind of dislike of my family and desire to get away from them, from the world, from everyone in this world, and see this stupid planet fall apart. But as I went through the journey and went through the various stages, and then as I came back and recrossed the threshold back, you start to realize, wow, I've come back into the business world, all guns blazing, and into the world now probably serving harder than I ever had before, with such a deep desire to serve humanity and help as many people as I can. because now you can see it. And in the end of the book, Much Afraid, who's the main heroine of the book, has this compassion for all the family and all the people that have been so horrible to her, and just wanted to go back and really serve these people with all of her heart. And she asked the shepherd for permission to go back and serve them, even though she'd now reached the high places and finished her path and didn't need to go back. But she goes, I really want to go back and help my family. And that's what happens to so many people. So that was a good one. And in a way, I've shared about the Dawn Treader, which is one of my favorite books in the Narnia series, when they enter the last sea with Aslan, and where they, as they go through this closer to Aslan's country, the kind of heaven or the gates of Samedi, this joy hits them. They get younger and younger, and they hit this point of no return. They either have to go back or cross over. And one of them chose to cross over and entered in, you know, without going through death. And that was Repachi. And Ben Caspian, one of the others, though, who so wanted to was a king, he chose to go back and serve his people because he realized he hadn't finished his path in serving, even though he approached the gates of Samedi and knew he would never have to come back once he crossed through. And he didn't want to go back, but he chose to go back. So, yeah, this is what's a really good little quote here. So we went through the Ezekiel 47 temple, how John said there's a river of life which comes out of our soul. So the day now we go on to the 16th stage, which is the hero's journey, or what we call the master of two worlds. This is a powerful one, and I found so much on this in my research, as well as what I was shown from scripture myself. It's almost hard to know what not to say, because there's so much one can say. So additionally, this is what's written in the hero's journey with Joseph Campbell. The master of two worlds is where the hero has learned to achieve a balance between the material and spiritual. So the hero has become comfortable and competent in the inner and outer worlds. So this is where the hero can now move between the two worlds without destroying or compromising either. It's where at one level, the hero can be a spiritual teacher, and next level, a crypto trader, or where the hero 1 minute is running a business or being a father or being a mother, and then the next minute is out there doing intercession, praying, and doing great healing meetings with many people. It's a stage where the hero might be working away on the farm, doing some crops, helping organise basically staff and businesses and workers, and continuing to grow the empire and grow the farm and make sure it runs efficiently and buy more farms and do whatever they want to do. And the next minute, the hero is running a local group with women or men and helping to heal them and teach them and work through their spiritual stuff, as well as do their own time of meditation. So having conquered their own fears in the quest, the hero is also the master of the world inside as well as outside. Or in a business sense, it might be where, yeah, the hero has now learned to be both a business owner, but also to work and enjoy their work as well. So this is a powerful thing. So Joseph Campbell basically says this, something like this here. So the freedom to pass back and forth across the world, the vision. So it says the cosmic dancer does not rest heavily in a single spot, but goes from one position to the other. So almost you become like an actor or an actress where you can play so many different roles. And some of you would know me. On the one hand, I'm the spiritual teacher who's on this webinar teaching and sharing about Christ. Then, you know, there might be another moment when I'm out there speaking and teaching on finances, doing tax planning. Tomorrow I'll be sitting there with a couple of clients doing meetings on tax planning and going through investments and going through business affairs and guiding and structuring. Then there's Dr. Bill and the troll on Facebook who goes there and just gives people shit, you know. And even today I was having a lot of fun insulting some guy on a site because they were coming out and being very highly religious and going on about, you know, this special frequency device that heals people. Well, is it really of God, you know, or should we be allowed to do this? And I kind of said, you stupid idiots. I said, if you guys listen to the church, I said, hey, years ago, the church said you couldn't even dance despite what the Psalms say. At one stage, they taught that the organ was a demonic instrument when the Bible talks about it. And then I went through various examples. So I said, I cannot believe you're still living in this, dumbass idea. If you believe in that, at least I hope you're not taking any pharmaceutical medication or anything like that. And of course, then I had someone saying, you're a horrible person. You should seek professional help. You're hurting this poor person's feeling. I said, oh, you're their fairy godmother now. I said, you absolute idiot. I said, you should, and I just was having a lot of fun. And so it's just a whole different side. So you start to basically, so basically the master of two worlds moves between different identities. They can be both the villain and they can be a good person. They move outside duality, so to speak. They don't see a separation anymore, like with business or so. Whereas someone who's not at this stage, they may have a real struggle with say, being a spiritual healer, prophet, teacher, and also being financially prosperous from trading, business, or whatever else. Or they might struggle, say, in day-to-day work. They might find it very hard to go and do their day-to-day chores with their children, with their family, looking after their family, doing responsible work in their workplace. Or equally, at the other extreme, they might just get too easily caught up with their work and business, and they'd find they neglect their spiritual duties and their connections, because they find it impossible to basically do both at the same time, because they see the two things as separate. It's an either or. They're still caught in duality. And I'll openly say that's probably most of my life. I was very, very trapped in that either or, and found it almost impossible to reconcile the two. And I go through periods of my life, I'd be worrying the spiritual guy, then I'd be worrying the financial guy, and then worrying the this, and worrying the that. And it's only really been in the last year or two that I've reached that period, that I've started to reach that ability to reconcile the two and see how they all do work together. So the master of two worlds is where you've kind of moved beyond your own personal limitations. You've moved beyond your own personal attachments, so to speak. And you've really let go of all these attachments and all these little things like that you so easily held on to. Personal ambitions have become dissolved. They willingly relax as to whatever may come to pass, so to speak. So, Star Wars, some examples here. Lord of the Rings, where Aragorn basically took his rightful place. Luke finally becomes a Jedi Knight. The Transfiguration of Christ, the body of Jesus became radiant with the glory and grace of God. Jesus was a wonderful example of the master of two worlds. On the one hand, he was very devoted to his mother, to his disciples, very practical. He was there with them day to day. When he was out on the mountain with the 5,000, and where the disciples were all caught up with the glory of being around Christ, Christ's first care was to make sure the 5,000 were fed. And he said, these people are hungry, let's get them some food. And then he manifested enough food for 5,000 people. He also made wine at a wedding for some people. So, he was a practical man, Jesus. He was the Son of Man. He wasn't just the Son of God, but he was the Son of Man. In other words, and I believe the scriptures call him the Son of Man over and over again, to remind everyone that Jesus actually was very, very human. He really chose to come in a human body and be the Son of Man. He was here for the redemption of man and women. That was his purpose why he was here. So you see that with Christ, the practical merging beautifully with the basically with the other side of him. Paul the Apostle, who was the great teacher you'd read about, the amazing man of God, he also was a tent maker, it talks about in certain times. He would actually work hard with tents. Very practically devoted man, and making sure he got things done. Beautifully devoted to his affairs. So balancing the spiritual and material worlds has for a long time been a challenge. Many of the spiritual pilgrims, prophets, and the yogis chose to live in mountains, cave, or even become celibate monks. And you can see that especially over since Christ. And it makes sense, because many of the pilgrims, of course, they could see the evils of the world. They would probably found it very hard to reconcile the two together. They were caught up a little bit probably in this is spiritual, but that's not. Many get caught up with the idea that money is somehow not spiritual because of what Christ said, which isn't actually what he said, but that was the beliefs of many of them. Many of the yogis chose to live in the caves and in the monasteries in the mountains. But many spiritual greats equally who got caught up in the material world, lost their ways and went off their path. And Christ warns about this numerous times in the Gospels. Like, he talks about how difficult it was to prosper without maintaining your spiritual essence. And he gives one example on the parable of the sower, where there was actually a case of someone who prospered greatly, but weeds and thorns came up and choked them, which were the cares of this world. In other words, they got too caught up with the worldly affairs, and that became their main priority. They started getting caught up in personal gain as their main priority. They lost connection with their higher path. Then equally, many of these great spiritual greats, Jesus talked about it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And again, Jesus was talking about attachments when he was talking about that. Not about the problem of having money, but about attachments and about what happens when you attach yourself to wealth and make that your first and foremost priority, which pretty much is a way of guaranteeing that you will stay in moksha. So Christ never said that wealth disqualifies you from moksha, and you can even see that in the New Testament, where Paul was very clear. But what Paul was very clear, as was Christ, that he said, fear God and use your wealth and riches for good, and use what you have for good. And generally you find that those who go on a hero's journey and they go through the full journey and reconcile the two and become the master of two worlds, number one, they usually become a whole lot richer. And number two, they realize that the more money they have, there's really so much you can do with it. I mean, you have to be incredibly self-indulgent to be able to find a way to keep spending, say, $1 million a week on personal gain. You know, you really would have to be beyond self-indulgent, have to be like, yep, well, okay, let's buy a $100 million house in this country. Let's buy 50 million in this country. Let's buy this one. Let's buy these planes. Let's buy these planes. Let's just have 15 Rolls Royces. You'd have to work pretty hard to do that. So many, and most of them would realize that the richer they got, the more they were like, well, actually, there's really only so much you can spend money on. And I would like to find a way to use my money for a greater good. And they end up doing it. You even see many of the wealthy, and we talk about Dr. Bill, but, like Bill Gates and like Warren Buffett, they end up setting up foundations, probably for the same reason. They probably hit a point when they go, well, and in their own warped way, they think they're doing good when they go and do what they're doing. But they think, well, I've got to find a way to do something other than just pretty much sit there all day. John DeMartini said in his Financial Mastery that if you don't have a higher purpose for your wealth, you'll go into debauchery. In other words, he just said that's just inevitable. You'll go into a debauchery. That's why many of the wealthy who don't have a really higher, deeper, meaningful purpose is, they'll start spending it up on orgies. I mean, I've got a friend who is full on into debauchery. He would get in lots of high-priced escorts onto a boat. He'd have the time of his life with them. He would, he had money just coming in without any problem whatsoever. So it's really about, when you start to master that two worlds, you start to see how they always work together, the two things. So it's learning to so the simple thing, the master of two worlds is someone who's learned to reconcile the two things, or in words I know Grace would really like to hear, king and the priest. So the scriptures talks about in Peter that you are a royal priest. You are a king and a priest. So in the Old Testament, you can only be one or the other. You can only be a king in business, or you could be a priest who could be spiritual. You could not be both. Whereas in the New Testament, Christ reconciled the two together. So you could be a king and a priest. So the master of two worlds is a king and a priest. On the one moment, they're wearing their spiritual robe, giving worship to God, serving with intercession, doing meditation, doing karmic cleansing, helping balance energies for people. The next minute, they might be sitting there trading the markets, running their business, setting up another company, doing their parenting and, getting their kids to school and making sure their kids are getting well taught, doing their job faithfully, whatever it is they happen to be doing. So the Transfiguration of Christ, we see this, where Jesus brought Peter, James, and John to a mountain. He basically becomes radiant before them, converses with Moses and Elijah, And then suddenly, of course, the Father appears and they see basically my beloved Son. Suddenly, Jesus has transformed back again into a man, and he's basically crossed and recrossed the divine threshold. He's the master of both worlds. In other words, he has been able to, on the one hand, be in a human body, walking around, living his normal life. The next minute, he's crossed the threshold and he is like doing amazing meditation sessions and seeing visions in Albany, that kind of thing. So notably, this vision only appeared to those who have forsaken worldly pursuits and secular desires. So in other words, Peter, James, and John had already forsaken all to follow Christ. They were devoted to moksha. They wanted karmic cleansing. They were doing their moksha path. So they were shown this thing. So to master two worlds, that's what Jesus was saying with the rich man in the kingdom of heaven, going through the eye of a needle. You can't have both. You can't, in other words, as soon as you get caught in duality and you think it's an either or, you're stuck. That's another way, probably a more simpler way of looking at what Christ was saying. As soon as you have an either or, you're going to be stuck. In other words, if you think that you can't be rich, or, you know, you can either be rich or you can be a spiritual person, you're stuck. So that's a very good way of thinking with it. Whereas what Christ was saying with the camel in the eye of a needle was that and I think I've shared this before, but if you actually read the allegory he was giving, when camels would go to Jerusalem, they couldn't actually go through the needle, which was a gap in the wall, unless they had all their goods taken off them. So all their goods were taken off them, and then they would go through. In other words, they had to be unattached and divest themselves of everything. In other words, Jesus was saying the only way you can have riches in this world and enter moksha is really every single day you're dying to your riches. Every day you're unattached to your wealth. Every day you know that you could lose all of it. You could wake up today, you could go for a drive thinking to yourself, wow, you know, I've just made $20 million on cryptos. Isn't life great? And then as you're thinking about it, a car hits you when you crossed over and you're thinking, shit, okay. Life is literally that short. So what Christ was teaching there is the master of two worlds means you really are unattached to it. You have it, but you're not attached to it. You value it, you steward it, you do well with it, but you know that someday you're going to wake up and it's going to be gone. You may wake up in this earth, you may wake up somewhere else. You may wake up tomorrow and you've lost everything. So you've got to be completely unattached to it. It's the only way you can be wealthy and still experience moksha. For me, I had to go as far as setting everything up through foundations and make sure that I limited my ability to acquire personal wealth, mainly because in my past lifetimes, and I could see that's a big weakness of mine, is this desire for power, mobster control, and personal wealth. So I've chosen instead to go the foundation path. And since I've done that and let go of everything, I cannot believe how much things have flowed for me in that area of my life and how much easier it's become. So it's really being unattached and knowing that exact thing. So this is what really Christ was saying. To further understand this concept, it's really useful if we scroll over. There's a couple of parts in the Bible which I'm going to look at. One is Genesis and one is Song of Solomon. So Genesis 32, let's just kind of squizzle our way over to that one. So in Genesis 32, when we go there, what we'll see is, it says here, Jacob went on his way and the angels of God met him. So he went on his way to meet his brother Esau, having left Laban, where he'd come from. So he's crossing back over. And it says that when Jacob saw them, he says, this is God's host. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Now, why did he call it Mahanaim? What does Mahanaim mean? Because actually a very, very, critical word, this one, Mahanaim. Mahanaim actually means the dance of two camps or the dance of two armies. So that's the literal exact meaning. So it's actually used here and in other places in the Bible. So it's basically talking about, and whenever you read the reference to Mahanaim, it's where God's angels are dancing together, but like they're with celebration, victory, and joy, and they're doing it with man or woman on earth. So in other words, it's a very clear reference to this dance of two camps. And you see that again later in the Bible in Song of Solomon, which I'll explain shortly. So Jacob said that. So Jacob, and to understand the context, Jacob is returning home from Uncle Laban, where he's basically made a lot of money, but he's also had his ass ripped off as well. And he now wants to reconcile with his brother Esau, who he tried to swindle previously 20 years earlier, and he successfully swindled him out of his birthright. And his brother was not particularly happy about it and wanted to kill him. Now, understand that you can kind of understand Esau to some degree, because the birthright in ancient times was a very valuable thing, and it was given to the firstborn. The birthright was actually pretty much the father's blessing that you would prosper and carry on all the wealth, and you would have not just the father's blessing, but the spiritual blessing over your life. So the ancients understood the power of the firstborn. They understood the power of oaths or promises. So Esau, actually what he did was he went and he flippantly despised his birthright. He was hungry, and when Jacob said, I'll give you some food if you give me your birthright, he goes, yeah, whatever, I don't care. So he actually gave an oath to swear over his birthright so he could eat some food. And Hebrews says, in the book of Hebrews, it's described as deplorable carnal or self-interest by what Esau did, an absolute despising his gift and despising what he had been promised and what he'd been given by as a gift, as the birthright. So I know this thing myself. I know what I speak over my kids. This is an aside. I'm very mindful of what we've spoken over our kids, even in the youth, because the power of these oaths or promises that we make. So Jacob is now returning and he wants to reconcile. So it's like he's wanting to reconcile with duality. He's wanting to get all of his karmic affairs sorted out. He's wanting to fix this whole thing up. And as he's going back, he has this encounter with the angels. And he calls this place Mahanaim, meaning the dance of two camps. You then go on to read the rest of that. And what Jacob does is he divides all his people and his assets into two camps. So he can give some to Esau and even keep things separate for some asset protection in case Esau raised him. And so so Mahanaim, the dance of two camps, it's like the reconciliation between earth and heaven is another way of looking at here, between the angels of heaven and between those of you on earth, which is so relevant considering about what I shared about moksha and the word. So it's like the secret to moksha and escaping moksha or the wheel of incarnation is that reconciliation between heaven and earth within you and between God and man, so to speak. So the rest of it here, I've read on this before. You go down to 24, and after Jacob has had this experience of the master of two camps, it said a man wrestled with him till the breaking of the day. And this is a very important thing to understand what happened here. Now, the word Jacob means, by the way, to swindle or to trick. It's, in other words, to kind of manipulate out of. So names in ancient times are very powerful, and this is so esoterically symbolic, everything that we read in here. So Jacob represents, in a way, the earthly man, the earthly spirit man. So a man who's still spiritual, but a man whose spirituality is reflected more in their earthly affairs. So they're very much earthly, material. And the reason Jacob was a swindler is he wanted to get blessings. He wanted to get interest. So why did Jacob swindle Esau? He saw a chance to make a bit of profit. He saw a chance, but his brother was desperate for food. He knew he could get the most valuable asset, and he basically tricked him into selling it to him for next to nothing. And he did it through his own strength and through his own power. And there's nothing wrong with that, so to speak. And the Bible even says this was of God because God wanted to bless Jacob, not Esau. But what happens here is that Jacob and God in this fight end up stalemating. And even God says to him, let me go for the day breaks. And his magnificent words, he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And this is why Jacob became the master of two camps. He says, what is your name? Now, why would he say that? In other words, who is your current identity? What are you right now? Like, who would you represent right now? Or what's your vibrationary state? And he said, Jacob, in other words, my vibratory state is I'm still Jacob, the man of the earth. And he says, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince, you have power with God and men and will prevail. So here's the secret. You have power with God and with men. In other words, you are now the master of two camps. You're now the master of two armies. You're no longer just Jacob, who's mastered the earth and has got your wealth like you have. You've done well, Jacob. You've made your prosperity. You ripped off your brother quite beautifully. And you then got ripped off by Laban, which he did. You got your karma back. But then we made sure that you left Laban with a lot of assets and wealth. So you're prosperous. You're prospered by your own hand in the affairs of the earth. But now you haven't just prospered in your wealth, and you haven't just wrestled and won with your wealth over Laban and your brother, but now you have power with God. Because he said, let me go, for the day breaks. And isn't it interesting? How many of us would have said, okay, fine, and let go? I think most people would. Because Jacob, as you can see this here, imagine that you're wrestling with an angel and then the angel knocks your hip out of joint and you're in a lot of pain. And the angel's saying, let me go. The easy thing to do would have gone, oh shit, maybe the angel's going to actually, rip my head off or something. And Jacob said, no, I'm not letting you go unless you bless me. In other words, you're going to bless me. So in that moment, Jacob prevailed and he was blessed. And when you read the rest of it, which I don't go into today, but Jacob became even more prosperous than ever before. He just prospered in everything that he did. He had a natural prosperity. Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, meaning I've seen God face to face and my life is preserved. It's so much to contemplate that. But so here, Jacob, his name was changed from Jacob, the earthly man, into Israel. So he's changed from Jacob to Israel. He changes from a man who receives gain from swindling to a man who prevails with God and secures a divine blessing by birthright. I'm sure you would agree it's a lot easier when you got your blessing by birthright, where you just have a natural propensity. I don't know if you've ever met people like that. I've met people like this. I remember in Sunshine Coast meeting a trader years ago. This guy just naturally attracted blessing. He told me when he first learned futures trading, he said, I made every mistake in the book, and he made 400,000 in his first 3 years in the early 1980s. And he said, literally, he goes, I made so many mistakes, it wasn't funny. He said, it was almost like I was meant to do it. He goes, I remember when the property market crashed in Queensland. He goes, I don't even know why I did it. He goes, I just woke up one day and thought, I'm sick of my properties, I'll sell them. I sold them all at the absolute highest price you could possibly have sold them for before everything crashed. He'd made a fortune on it. He then met different people. He was making so much money from his trading, and he was a very kind guy. He helped me quite a lot, and it was very interesting to meet this guy, a man who just naturally, just like had this divine birthright of blessing. It was like whatever he touched, it just seemed to work for him. No doubt his karma in the financial area was pretty damn good. I met another guy, a crypto whale, who was like this, very, very much like this. He just had been greatly blessed with his cryptos. And I actually, and this was in 2018, I had asked about him. And I was clearly shown in past lives how much good this man had done with his money. Because I actually asked, show me. I saw that this man had done so much good. I actually saw what he was. He was like a lord in Middle Ages and other places. And he had just given so much. He was constantly using his money for good. He'd managed it wisely. In this lifetime, he was the same. He was ridiculously generous. He insisted on paying me extra for my work because I got him a great result. He would do that with other people who do business deals with. He just insisted on paying them extra. Because he just always told me, he goes, look, he said, there's so much wealth I can share. He said, I like sharing with people. It makes it more fun. And I thought, not surprising this guy's prosperous. So this was the master of two worlds, where you actually learn to bring both together. So what was interesting with both this crypto whale man and with this other guy, I would say they truly mastered the Jacob side of their life, but not the Israel side. I remember the crypto whale man used to always say to me, he was often asking me guidance on his spiritual side. Admittedly, he had a lot of hurts in that area, and he was working through a lot. When I haven't seen him for a while now, but he was working through a lot still. So that was a good example of someone who'd mastered the Jacob side and now was trying to work out the Israel side. The other guy was, I'd say, was very much the same. I've probably been the opposite in my life. I really had to master the Israel side before I could start to master the Jacob side of my life. So the master of two camps, though, brings it all together, and everything starts to come together. And the kind of flipping and throwing and moving between things back and forth, going into this, going into that, trying this, trying that, trying all these different things, it stops happening. You get settled. You find that place where you've reconciled everything. And you see this distinction constantly throughout the Bible between Jacob and Israel. And it's very interesting. And if you don't understand the power of what happened in this part, in this chapter 32, the Bible can be very confusing, because you'll go through it and go, why do they sometimes say Jacob and sometimes Israel? You know, why does this happen? And until I understood this, I used to find that a bit confusing. But here's just a couple of examples. I could probably give you 100 and something, but here's just two. So Isaiah 49 verse 6, when talking about the purpose of Christ, or the Christ, it says, it's a light thing that you should be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and reserve and restore the preserved of Israel. So why would they say these two separate things? People who didn't actually read the wording and clearly understand the power of what's being said here might just go, oh, it's just saying the same thing in a different way. No, it's not. There's a clear reference here that you will bring both together. That's why I personally believe that this 49 verse 6 is talking about a different Christ to first Christ who came. But it is the first Christ who came, but coming in a different form. So you will see that here. So Isaiah 49, I'll just take you there. You can see Christ in here, but you can also see a second Christ here. There's the lion and the lamb. There's the Christ with peace and the Christ with the sword. So it says here, he said to me, you are my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. And then he said, I have labored in vain, I've spent my strength for naught, yet surely my judgment is with the Lord. And then he said, it is a light thing that you should be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the preserved of Israel. He says, I will also give you as a light to the Gentiles, in other words, those who aren't even of the original seed, that you may be my salvation to the ends of the earth. So what's this saying? If we think of it from a moksha perspective, almost you got to think of it like this. So think of it something like this. So I'll just write it here on a slide. So think of it like this. So moksha. So what you've got is two different groups of people. So you got like the Jacob seed. You got like the Jacob Israel. And you got the Gentiles. So what's the difference? When you read scripture about the, in fact, to make this a bit easier, let me just do this. So the difference is, so the Jacob Israel. So Jacob, Israel. So they're both part of the original seed of God. In other words, those who were created by the Father, who basically, by the Father, who fell into this matrix, or chose to come in here and serve. So that's the two different things. The Gentiles are not the original seed. Separately, and you can read this in Bits of Sophia and in various other mystery school books, but separately created by the archons and, you know, beings here for the purpose of harvesting their own ends. So many of these grotesque beings that you see, they were souls that were not the original seed. Okay? So, in fact, I'll put this here just to make it easier. So separately created by the archons and beings here for the purposes. But what happened was, given an opportunity through Christ to be grafted in, and you can read this in Romans, see Romans 9 and 10. So it's the opportunity through Christ to be grafted in and become part of the seed of God, and become part of the original God or indigo seed, i.e. the sons of God. That's why it says in John, it says, for those who believe, it says, he came to his own, but his own did not receive him. So what does he mean by that? He came to his own, which is here, his own who did not receive him, but not his own. But to those who did receive him, he gave the right to become the sons of God, even to those who believed in his name. In other words, he gave these people too, who originally never created as indigos. They were like earthers, you know, basically, you know, angelic humans, those kind of things. So in other words, even what's called possibly, I don't know, reptilians, possibly even. So in other words, they didn't have the DNA or seed template. But it says those ones, he gave the chance to become the sons of God, even to those who believed in his name. And you see that in the New Testament. Jesus himself said, I never came for, you know, these people. Jesus himself never came for these people. He said that very clearly. But after he left, Paul became the one who brought the message, and Peter brought the message to the Gentiles. So some of his own disciples carried it on, but Jesus came through his original seed. So the two original seeds here, Jacob, Israel, and material dominion in courts, governments, business, etc., as I said, and then Israel. These were like the indigos, the star seeds, hidden array. So why would it say here, for example, to restore the preserved of Israel? So in other words, there's this thing happening now, the master of two worlds, to raise up the tribe of Jacobs. In other words, to get those who the original indigos, star seeds, but those who are actually very much involved in business, courts, even Australia, America, many of these, to raise up back into turning back to Almighty God and taking back dominion in the courts, removing the Masonic Lodge, removing the Archons and removing the reptilians and the Draconians and all the guys who suck blood completely out of that system, to raise up instead the tribes of Jacob who had lost their inheritance from karmic sin and disease, and also to restore the preserved of Israel. Like how many are indigos, seekers of Christ, meditators, but are grieving, hidden away in exile, in mountains, not sure what to do, just staying connected to Christ, connected to the higher realms, but like in a sense really waiting to clear things and to get out of here, but to raise these up to give everyone a chance to receive inheritance of the earth. And on top of that, he said to give you as a light to the Gentiles, be my salvation to the ends of the earth. In other words, to bring the message of Christ to basically unravel the matrix and bring out a whole new group of people. So that's what's happening here. And you can see this also, the distinction between the two worlds. The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob. So again, you can see that distinction here, Zion, the city. So there's so much here I'm saying, but the master of two worlds is where you bring the two together. So no longer is it a case, well, I'm just a love and light. I don't care about money. I don't care about governments. I don't care about politics. No longer equally is it just, well, I'm just a practical woman or man. You know, I'm about bringing God's truth to courts, to governments. No, you bring the two back together. You master the two worlds. You wear many hats. On the one hand, you're the energy healer. You're the meditator. You're the love and light person who's bringing softness and gentleness and healing to the wounded soul, to the broken heart. The next minute, you're the mighty giant who's going out there speaking, running a speaking business, or in the courts, or standing up in the courts for what's right, or getting involved in building a business that brings great help to many people with ethics and integrity, or building a fantastic farm that feeds many people. It's actually bringing everything together, so you find God in everything that you're doing. Deva Ma, the great Buddhist teacher, was the first one where many of the Buddhists were very much caught in the duality. They used to teach that you couldn't be a true Buddhist unless you completely walked away from all affairs and everything that you were doing. And of course, many mothers were in real conflict, like, what do I do with my kids? And the original Buddhist masters would say, well, you know, unless you let go of your kids and you've got to hardly see them. Whereas different masters said, well, while you're feeding your baby and raising your young children, you can be in a mindful state. By not getting distracted from it and being really focused and centered and present and connected with your child, you're actually, by doing that, you are actually showing mindfulness. You're showing your spirituality. And it was the same with Lahiri Mahasaya, who taught the Indians how they could actually find God and become Kriyas just in their day-to-day housewife duties, in their day-to-day business affairs, in their day-to-day school teachers and everything. So this is all about that hero's journey when you actually cross back over and start to serve, like really, really serve. So you start to actually serve, like really serve. But now everything is coming together for you. So finally, we see this also in Song of Solomon, where we actually see this amazing scripture here, a book dedicated to Christ and his bride. So we see the same word as with Jacob when he saw the angels Mahanaim or Mahanaim used. So it talks about this. Let's just go to Song of Solomon 6 and read what this says. Who's enjoying this and seeing the different things happening here? Sheldon, Christine, great. So you see this here. So remembering what Song of Solomon is. So Song of Solomon is the whole story is about the Shulamite, who, by the way, the word Shulamite means girl, woman of peace, like a soft-hearted girl or woman of peace. And the first chapter, she starts off very bruised and wounded and misunderstood by her family. And it says, that's why it starts off in chapter 1 saying, I am black but comely. You know, I was wounded by my brothers and by my family. I was misunderstood. And then you see chapters 2 to 5, she goes through this great transformation process and healing, where she goes through tribulations, challenges. But now something's happened to her in this chapter. So you start to see how and it's important to understand the context from chapter 5. In chapter 5, she went searching for her beloved, but actually made the mistake of going to the watchmen, in other words, to church, the leaders of the city, thinking they could help her, looking for something outside of herself. And in fact, I'll take you there because it's important to understand this here. And it says here that the watchmen that went about the city found me, they smote me and they wounded me and took away my veil of innocence from me. In other words, her beloved had withdrawn himself, she'd been tested, and she'd gone about, and then she'd got wounded by the watchmen of the city. In other words, the leaders who were meant to help her actually wounded her heart and broke her heart. But that only got her to go deeper for her beloved. Rather than get bruised and wounded and bitter by it, she just went harder and hungrier at her beloved. So by this chapter 6 now, all she's focused on is her beloved. Now, what do we mean by beloved? Let's think of this in a tantric context. In a tantric context, the way to think of this is her focus had almost completely gone away from anything about herself by now. Whereas the journey had been very self-centered, all she was now craving was oneness and union with her beloved. I believe many women and men make the mistake, for example, of think I'm seeking for a partner as in a person, when really what they're really seeking is that deep union. And David Davis says this in The Way of a Superior Man. He said men can often spend their life seeking for that deep love, the connection with a woman and oneness. And when they get it, they realize they were never searching for that, but they were searching for God. And he said many men, when they find that deep connection with a woman, feel more restless than ever and realize all they want to do is come home to God. It's quite an amazing chapter, the last chapter of his book. Many women find the same too. Once they merge into that deep union of love with a man, they start to crave and desire a deeper love and connection with Source, with God, with the Father. So really, the whole thing is just the journey of love, a tantric union. So another way to think of the master of two camps is you've learned you've actually reconciled your masculine and feminine energies. You're no longer like a masculine woman or a feminine man or even a feminine, overly feminine woman or overly masculine man. As a masculine man, you've learnt to balance your feminine and allow your feminine energies to flow through. You've embraced the feminine. Or as a woman, no longer are you just, say, a pure feminine woman. You may well be feminine, but you've learned to embrace that masculine side and energies in your life. You've learned to love the masculine. You've learned to enjoy the masculine influence and leadership in your life. And men have learned to love the guidance of the feminine and the divine feminine. So it's when you start to reconcile the two together. And so understand that she's completely consumed right now with her beloved. Her whole personal interests have gone. All she wants is oneness with her husband, with her lover, and divine union. And this is what happens. Before I was even aware, my soul made me like the chariots of Aminadab. Now, that's a word that many find hard to interpret with Bible commentators, but actually Aminadab, the word actually means, I'll take you here. Let me just find the Aminadab. So Aminadab means, Ami means my people, Nadab means princely or noble. It actually suggests a highly exalted state in soul and mindset. And when you read the rest of Song of Solomon, it said that rather than now being the abused one or the one that was kind of scorned upon by her family and those around her, it said now the daughters of Jerusalem are now looking to her for leadership. All the women are craving the Shulamite and starting to draw to her saying, guide us, guide us. Where can we find your beloved? How can we find that tantric oneness with Christ like you have? Show us the way. Now that you found it, please show us the way. So this is saying that when you reach the master of two camps, it's where you've reconciled the two together. You've lost your own ego in a way. You've lost that your own sense of your own self or soul and what I call a self-centered way of living and driving. Now your whole way of living is to experience the love and the union with Christ and the oneness with the Father and the oneness with Christ. Or as a man with the Divine Mother, that oneness with the Mary Magdalene, the cosmic feminine Christ. So you become so merged. In other words, you've started to reach that purest tantric state. Even in the purest Vedic Tantra, they teach that samadhi is when you enter that complete merging of the masculine and feminine into that pure oneness of bliss. Because Brahma originally in the Hindu teachings of the Bhagavad Gita is the pure ineffable essence of God, the invisible God that's neither masculine or feminine, who chose to separate into masculine and feminine to help bring understanding for the creation parts that we're in. So the masculine feminine of himself is just the concept of duality, but it helps us to come to understand Brahma, or the ineffable essence, both different parts. So until you reach pure tantric union of that masculine feminine oneness, only then do you enter the gates of samadhi. And that is why many who've had even tantric sex or intimacy, who've actually gone to the highest levels in that, have actually reported that having out-of-body experience during lovemaking, where they actually see gates and portals and like entering those gates, and they start to see lights and things like that, or similar things. So basically, think of it like a statement of surprise at the exaltation that's taking place. So when it says this thing here, before I was even aware, my soul made me like the chariots of Aminadab. So it's, in other words, my soul, I suddenly realized to my astonishment that I've actually got this very exalted state of mind and thinking. I don't fear anything anymore. I just feel complete in my beloved now. I feel complete in my oneness with Christ. Charles Finney, in his final latest books, he actually said that when he reached this state in his own life, he said it was very hard for him to teach because very few could understand what he was trying to say, but the few he did said had amazing connections with Christ. But he said once he actually realized that the whole Song of Solomon was a book of tantric oneness and deep intimacy and love with Christ, with the cosmic Christ, he said he noticed that he'd been a man prone to anxiety and depression and nervous breakdowns, which he was. He said once he had this happen to him, he said from that point on, his life was pretty much walking in the garden with Christ. Every day of his life was a state of joy and bliss. Very much like the voyage of the Dawn Treader, like when they started to go towards Aslan's country, they just felt an increase in joy and bliss. I personally believe with all my heart, this is what Enoch talked about when it says he walked with God, then was not. Enoch now walked daily. It said Moses literally saw God face to face, as did Elijah. They walked daily with the Father, with God. That's all they saw, the oneness, the tantric desire with God. And I believe this is the whole secret to escaping moksha, where you reach that point, you're so one that when your soul passes over, it says, who can separate us from our beloved? Like, who can separate us? Not even death can. Because as soon as you experience death, you would instantly go up through that 45-degree angle they found in the remote viewing section, and the angels would be taking you straight to heaven and straight through to those higher dimensions. Isaiah 35 says something very, very similar to this. It says, thinking about that super highway or portal, which you come into the earth, which the remote viewers saw. If you read Isaiah 35, it talks about that here. It says there will be a highway, and it shall be called the highway of holiness. In other words, a pure highway that the unclean cannot pass over. In other words, those who are karmically unclean, those who are still trapped in the self-centered way of being in the matrix, will not pass over this highway. A highway of holiness. You see this also in Isaiah, this highway, where it talks about this here, where it talks about in this day, there shall be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria and Assyria into Egypt. And it talks about this highway in the keys of Enoch, like a portal or a highway straight into these realms, into these other dimensions. So amazing stuff. So the chariots of Abinadab, you can see this here. So commentators suggest that the chariots of Abinadab could be actually linked to the Abinadab which you see earlier on in the Bible, you know, like much, 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 much earlier on. So it says Abinadab, who basically housed the ark before David took it into the city. Verse 13, which is what's also spoken about here. In fact, I've just got to go back to a slide on this one here. So this before this one. So the Song of Solomon, we see this journey. Like Shulamite means girl of peace, as I mentioned here. So notice the words, before I was even aware, my soul made me like the chariots of Abinadab. So by reconciling and balancing the masculine, she became whole, exalted like a god, no longer enslaved in duality. So it says here that, in fact, when you read the scriptures in Samuel, it talks about when King David danced before the Lord and carrying the ark, the presence of God, back in. It says the bride joins in with the dance. So there's no Michal, who is David's wife, who contemptuously mocked it. So it says we see a tantric union taking place. So there's such a deep tantric, or almost sacred sexual dance or oneness dance happening here between to merge the masculine and feminine. So in conclusion, there's so much here. We see this in the story, says of Gladys Aylward, an incredible missionary. This lady Gladys led an extraordinary trek of 100 orphans across the war-torn mountains of China to reach safety at incredible danger and cost to herself. When she and the orphans finally arrived at their destination, people were lined the streets cheering for them. Gladys was wondering in amazement, who are they cheering for? Surely not for us. She had no idea that the people were even aware of what she'd been going through. She'd become a heroine without realizing that anyone even knew of her existence. Extraordinary, basically feat or whatever else to do this very thing. And she became a hero without even trying to do this. I remember seeing this same, so in other words, all she was interested in about was doing this very thing. And there's a movie called Tears of the Sun. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but with Bruce Willis. Very similar story where he literally, he and his team of mercenaries who were sent in to do a particular job ended up actually, being cheered in there for what he did and how they freed a whole lot of these refugees and others away from this group. And so in other words, to carry these people through to safety. And this whole thing is about people who've literally done stuff at incredible cost without even thinking about it. I remember seeing my father, he was given a State Honour Award some years ago, and it was just something to do he done with politics. But one of the awards that was given for the highest bravery award in West Australia, I remember the whole room gasped when they told the story, and the lady who walked up looked very embarrassed about the whole thing. and like she had no idea what had just happened to her. But what happened was this lady in her 50s was at the beach, and what happened was she heard this almighty scream, and there was a shark who was attacking a young child or trying to get someone or surfer or someone. I can't remember exactly what. About 50 meters out, without even thinking, she bolted, dived straight into the water, swam right out, literally ran up to the guy who's being bitten and he's got blood and he's trying to get the shark off, grabs the shark, pulls the shark off the guy, and by some miracle never got bitten herself, but she grabbed the guy off the shark and pulled it away and freed the guy. Now, everyone just gasped in the room, as I'm sure you all would. And she looked very, very embarrassed by the whole thing. And you could just see she looked a bit kind of in shell shock, like, why am I even up here? And she could hardly speak. They asked her to give a speech, when she said, I don't really know what to say. She said, what can I say? She said, I just saw a guy being beaten by a shark and I didn't think about it. I just dived in and thought I've got to get that shark off him. And so this is really like what this whole thing is about. So in conclusion, the master of the two worlds suggests you have mastered spirit and matter, or probably a better word even than mastered, but let's say mastered, and I'll say reconciled is another word I will use here, and you've reconciled spirit and matter. So let's just use those words, mastered and reconciled. So this is the greatest challenges on the spiritual quest. How do you become connected with and live a higher spiritual purpose, yet survive and find a comfortable abode in the physical material world, let alone master it while maintaining one's spiritual purity? And I'm sure that all of you here could probably really relate to this. And how do I function in the world today and seeing what's going on, have a higher purpose, and yet do that to master moksha, complete my path, and know this is going to be the last time I'm here on earth. So this is the Kriya Yogis at the same challenge, and it's why Lahiri Mahasaya was so unique in how he found a way to overcome it. Okay, so think about today what you've learned and what actions you will take. Maybe you share today your greatest learning that you got from this today. And you can either do it on the text, or if you want to take the mic, take the mic. I always like hearing people talk and share what they get. And just share what you got, what you feel, the greatest lessons, and what actions, if any, you're going to take.
Yeah, Warren, it's been a really great session, I feel, especially when you pull apart the scriptures. For me, that's really helpful, understanding what the words are symbolic for. But I think probably the biggest thing is bringing everything into balance, not feeling guilty about doing one or the other. It's always about bringing balance. We've talked about that a lot, and bringing balance, and also having the ability to be able to let go of stuff. For me, that I've gone to for a long time, I still have to learn to let go of more stuff. That's just a reminder to do that. Yeah, so it's been really good. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Christine. Sheldon says it's a challenge with duality being really unattached was my greatest lesson today. Yeah, couldn't agree more, Sheldon. Really unattached. Steve, action, keep going, lesson The merging of the spiritual and earthly world not only possible but desirable. Jody, I can balance a working life and a spiritual life. Absolutely, yeah, Jody. That's exactly the greatest secrets that the Kriya Indians, yogis, learned was that they actually used to ban people who were involved in any kind of, parenting or jobs or anything from being part of the schools. And Lahiri Mahasaya just changed everything and let people balance their spiritual life, and even encouraged people to join. So many were being initiated into Kriya yogis who had jobs, ran businesses, were parents, everything. And as Dipama, the Buddhist master, taught, just learn to be mindful in what you're doing. So the greatest way you can be the master of two worlds is whatever you're doing, be mindful. If you're running business, do it well. If you're, got kids to look after or family affairs, really do it mindfully. Really be focused and present and notice what you feel. So anyone else? Okay, Grace, are you there at the moment, or you? I think you said something about my mum would turn up or something.
Yeah, your dearest mother is here, Warren.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Warren.
Hi, Mum.
Say
How
hello.
are you?
Shall I have Penbo?
Hi, Ozzy.
Hi, how are you, Mum?
Good. Where are you?
I'm at home. I'm speaking to people.
Oh no, I thought I saw this picture of you on the Grand Canyon.
Are you saying your son is a girl?
Who's that? I haven't got my glasses on.
No.
Oh, Warren, you've changed. You've become ambidextrous.
I'm definitely not a girl.
Warren, you are crazy.
Well, I got it from my parents.
I tell you, well, from your father, not your mother. I'm just saying to Grace on I think it's the 3rd of July, the Saturday. I think on the 3rd of July, I'm going to have a little evening with family and just a few friends, see if Kelly can come and so on. So keep it clear and come. It's Dad's 85th birthday.
That's really good, Mum.
Yeah. I got a ring from Gary the other day, Friday, and he had a long talk, and I said, "Oh, what's this for, Gary?" He said, "Oh, just felt I'd just chat to you and let you know how things are." He asked how you were and how Michael was. Linda?
Alex wants to know if he's invited
Who's
too.
Alex?
These
Hi,
other
Alex.
people are listening.
Hi, Alex. Are you keeping my son in order? You'll be battling. But keep on track. Use the whip and the chain and whatever else it takes.
Alex said no chance.
Oh,
So everybody, this is Warren's dearest mum.
yes, it's the dearest one because it's the only one he's got. The others all gave him away for adoption.
Oh, you're responsible for bringing me into the world, Mum, so it's your problem, not mine.
Warren, just remember, I brought you in the world and I can take you out just as quickly. So just keep that in mind, won't you?
Oh, Christine is here as well, listening.
Hi, Christine.
So we have Christine, Steve, Alex, Miko, Mark, and Sheldon. Sheldon's actually in Canada.
Oh my goodness. Is that Sheldon?
Yes.
Oh dear.
Just getting Pembo used to these webinars. She's not
Yeah.
used to this. So
It's all a bit much for me.
Yeah, Mum's a bit older now and old-fashioned.
Yes, I've gone past 21.
Hi, Pimbo.
Hello. Oh, that's Christine.
yes.
Hi,
Yes,
Christine.
hello.
I'm well. How are you and Bernie?
Very good, thank you.
You're keeping my son in order, I hope, Christine. We're trying. Just tell me you're trying.
That's not possible.
I know. I gave that away too.
Oh, I'm not going to. Oh, dear.
Keep safe.
See, there's Warren.
Put the camera on, Grace. Let everyone see Mum's ugly face.
Oh, I'm not going on camera. Jeez.
Oh.
Let's say hello, everyone.
Now that I've got past 21, I'm beginning to get older.
Whoops. Who's that? All right. There you go. Hey, everyone. This is Penny Black.
Hi.
This is the reason why Warren came into this world.
Don't hold that against me. I ordered quadruplets. And I got Warren.
You can see why I put up with all my life and why I got messed up, guys.
Always blame Mum. That's a good cop out.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
This is two worlds playing out, hey, Warren?
Very much two worlds playing out. The perfect balance of the seminar.
I always remember Shakespeare's words. I say this to my students. The fault lies, dear Brutus, not in our stars, but in ourselves. So how's that for a good motto?
Absolutely.
It's a goodie, isn't it? My poor students roll their eyes if they say, oh, there was a terrible piano and I didn't play as well. That is what I say to them.
Can you see Warren?
Where's Warren?
There's Warren there.
Well, there's a big blob.
Oh, you need your glasses.
I know, I do.
There's a light behind me. Let's just remember, that's the glorious light behind me, Mum. So just speak to him.
What a shame. Glorious life behind you. Well, you shouldn't leave that behind.
So we've got Jody, Christine, Steve, Alex, yeah. So all these names.
Well, have fun, guys.
Sammy's here. Sammy, come up here. Sammy's here too.
Who's Sammy?
Sammy.
Oh, Sammy. Hello, Sammy. Are you very shy?
Yeah. Sammy's not exactly shy, but here she is. You can see her picture on the camera.
Hi, Sammy.
Hi, Penny.
Hi, Sammy. Sammy, I'd love to have some more of your buttered chicken. Yummy. And I made that soup for you the other day, that pumpkin and sweet potato soup.
I'll come have it next time, Penny. I love it.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. That's good. Well, you're welcome. All right. Okay, guys, I'll leave you in peace. So behave yourselves and don't do what I wouldn't do. So you have lots of scope there. Bye. I'll let Grace get on with her work.
Oh. Well, perfect balance for the whole message. You couldn't have got a better thing.
How good is that? Now, everyone's met Penbo. Warren talks about you sometimes, Pen.
I'm just going to say hi to William. Is Joe asleep too?
Yes, he is. Hang on. Oh dear.
Well, what can I say?
What can I say?
I'm speechless.
And she came in the right day with my house in the state as it is. And now she's gone to get William. Well, guys, this is so good, isn't it? An example of two worlds.
Oh, dear.
Okay, well, there you go. Everyone's got a face of Pen by now.
You do. So who loves my mum?
I'm kind of lost for words at the moment, which is quite unusual for me.
Oh, dear.
She normally rings when she drops in, but this is the first time she dropped in without calling, I tell you.
Yeah, why not? On that note, I think we should end. Can't really say any more after that, can you?
Thank you, Warren, for leaving me with your mum.
Well, You've done a good job, Grace. You know.
I'll
You're doing a
send her
wonderful
to
job.
you. Ah.
Like I said, I got your mum, and I was pretty happy with that deal. So.
All right.
Okay. See you, everyone.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.